Okay, this is 2.3 notes, factor by grouping. So, first example, notice we have 4 terms. So what you're going to do with 4 terms is you're going to group 2 of them together. So you have 2 pairs. Okay? You shut that door, please. Let's shut the door and come in here. We're going to work now. Okay? Thank you. Okay? So you're going to group these 2 together, and you're going to group these 2 together. And what you're going to do is you're going to factor out the greatest common factor. So can anybody tell me from yesterday's homework assignment, what's the GCF of 8r cubed minus 64r squared? Does 8 go into 64? Yes, we know 8's one of them. And then what did I tell you to pick when there's r cubed and r squared? What do we use? The lowest, because you got r cubed is r times r times r, right? And r squared is r times r. What do they share? Just what? R squared, okay? So we take out an 8r squared. Okay? 8r squared. And what do we multiply times 8r squared to get 8r cubed? Well, you're going to multiply times 1 to get 8, correct? What do you multiply times r squared to get r cubed? You add exponents.
Because you just add r.
Yeah, it'd be r, correct? Doesn't 8r squared times r give me 8r cubed? Now, what are you going to multiply times 8 to get negative 64? Negative 8. And then to multiply times r squared to get r squared, it's just 1, correct? So there's your first one. Your second one, there really isn't anything to factor out other than 1. So what do you notice now about these 2 that you factored out the GCF? Here's the GCF of this one, and here's the GCF of that one. What do you see that's the same now? Aren't these 2 here the same? So we can factor them out right out in front. And then what's left over after taking that out, when I take that r minus 8 out up here, what's left over?
8r.
8r squared plus 1, and I'm done. I have it factored. So we went from here to here by using factoring, by grouping. And I told you yesterday, factoring is a special kind of division. So if we wanted to check to see if we factored it correctly, what could we do? Multiply this thing back. Now that we've already got the answer. Let's just check it by using the box method and see if we get the same thing. So we have r minus 8 and 8r squared plus 1. We're just checking it, okay? So what's r times 8r squared? What's r times 8r squared?
8r squared.
8r to the third. Very good. What's r times 1? 1r. What's negative 8 times 8r squared? Negative 64 r squared. And then what's negative 8 times 1? Negative 8. Okay? Now, notice all those terms are different, aren't they? Correct? I can't combine anything. Normally I could combine diagonally, couldn't I? So now I just write it in standard form. 8r cubed, then negative 64r squared, there's that one, plus r And there's that one. Does that get me back to where I started from? It does. So I factored it correctly. But this is what I was just checking it. This is what we want right here. Okay? Okay, look at example 2. I've got 12p cubed minus 21p squared plus 28p minus 49. Okay, notice we have 4 terms. 1, 2, 3, 4. So when you have 4 terms, you're going to use grouping. So I'm going to group these 2 together and these 2 together. That's why we call it grouping. Okay? Now, what is the GCF between 12p cubed and 21p squared? What would I factor out of those 2? Does 12 go into 21? Okay, what's the next biggest factor for 12? 6, correct? Does 6 go into 21? Then the next one for 12 is 4. Does 4 go into 21? No. Does 3 go into 21? Yes. So it's 3. And then what about p squared and p cubed? Which one would I tell you to use? Always use the what? The squared, the lowest power. Agreed? Okay, so now what do we get inside the parentheses? What do we multiply times 3 to get 12? 4. And what do we multiply times p squared to get p cubed? Just p, correct? Because you add the exponents. Now, what do I multiply times 3 to get negative 21? What do I multiply times 3 to get negative 21, kids?
Yes.
Negative 7. Okay, so I've got that one factored, don't I? Now, looking at the second one, what's the GCF of 28p minus 49? Does 28 go into 49? No. Then the next biggest factor of 28 is 7. Does 7 go into 49? Yep. So that gives me 4p minus 7. 7 times 4p is 28p, and 7 times negative 7 is negative 49. What do you notice about these 2? Are they the same? Okay. And then what my teacher used to do to me is after I factored out that 4p minus 7, he would go like this. And he'd say, what's left over? 3p squared plus what? 7. And there it is. Okay? Because everything that we're doing in this unit builds on the next. Factor out the GCF. Then we're going to factor by grouping. And then tomorrow, we will start split the middle. How many remember split the middle from Algebra 1? Factoring a trinomial. So everything that we do is going to be built on the one previous to it. Does that make sense? So if you're not getting your homework done, you need to, because it builds on the next. Does that make sense? Okay. You guys do a pretty good job in here. All right. Next one is 12x cubed plus 2x squared minus 30x minus 5. Okay, so we're going to factor by grouping. We're going to group these 2 together and these 2 together. Okay, so looking at 12x cubed plus 2x squared, what's the GCF? All right, does 12 go into 2?
Yes. No.
But does 2 go into 12? Yeah, so we know 2's going to work, isn't it? And what do we pick between x cubed and x squared? X squared. Agreed? Okay, so what would I multiply times 2x squared to get 12x cubed? 6x. Agreed? What would I multiply times 2x squared to get itself?
1.
So it would be plus 1. Agreed? Everybody see where I'm at? And notice, if I distribute it here, I'd get right back to where I started from, wouldn't I? Now, here's something you need to put in your notes, kids. Notice, both of these are negative. So when the first term is negative, you're going to always factor out a negative. So whatever we're factoring out here, it's going to be a negative, okay? When the first term is negative, you always want to factor out a negative. It makes life a lot easier. Do you hear what I'm saying? Okay, so what's the GCF between 30x and 5? 5. Agreed? And then that ends up giving me 6x plus 1. Okay, so now what's common? 6x plus 1, right? And then what's left over? These are gone, correct? 2x squared minus 5. And there it is, factored. So you got to understand how to factor the GCF out, don't you? Okay? Can I move it to the next one? Number 4. Okay, I want everybody to do number 4 on their paper right now. See if you can do it. What did we factor out of the first 2? What's the GCF? Pardon me? First, take the smallest number. Does 6 go into 16? Okay, what's the next biggest factor of 6? 3? Does 3 go into 16? Then the next factor is 2. So 2 goes into it. And then we have v cubed and v squared. Which one have I always told you to use? The smallest power, correct? So then that ends up giving me 3v minus 8. Okay? 21 and 56. Okay, 21. Does 21 go into 56? No. The next biggest factor of 21 is 7. Does 7 go into 56? 8 times. So I'm going to take out a 7, and I end up with 8v minus 8. Whoops, 3v minus 8, correct? Sorry about that. 3v minus 8. Notice these two are the same, aren't they? So I'm going to put them in front. And then what's left over is what? 2v, looks like an R, doesn't it? My V's have tails on the top. My R's have tails on the side. Okay? And there you go. How many got that one right? Okay, this is important because this is going to relate when we start splitting the middle. You have to be able to do this or you can't split the middle. Okay? Look at number 5. Okay, so these have a little bigger numbers, don't they? So I have to help you on this one. Between 63 and 54, okay, does 63 or does 54 go into 63? No, the next biggest factor of 54 is 27. Does 27 go into 63? No, what about 9? Yeah, so it's 9 what?
9
N squared, correct? We're going to group those and those two there. So that gives me 9 times 7 give me 63, right? And 9 times 6 gives me 54 N squared. So I end up with that right there. Okay? Now notice they're both negative, aren't they? Correct?
Yes.
So we know we're going to have to factor a negative out. Now, 90 doesn't go into 105, but it looks like to me 3 goes into both of them, right? Remember the divisibility test? What's 1 plus 0 plus 5? Does it add up to a multiple? I mean, it's 6, so 3 goes into it. Plus, they also end in 0 or 5, so we know what number goes into it. if it ends in 0 and 5. 5 goes into it, right? So let's see if that's the biggest one. I'm going to take 5 out of it, and that gives me 21 minus 21n minus 5 goes in there twice, 16, I think. Yes. Okay, 16. So I should have taken, I see another one that'll come out of there, I think. Let's see here. This should be 18. Okay, so that can't be right. I took a 5 out, which gave me 21n minus 18. So I could have taken, everybody look here, everybody look real quick. 2 and 18, what's the greatest common factor between 2 and 18? 2, so I should have taken out 2 times 5, which is, 21 and 18, 3. I should have taken out 15, correct? That's the greatest because I took out a 5, correct? Look inside the parentheses right now. I got 21n minus 18. Well, they still have a factor I can take out, which is 3, agreed? So then I take the 3 times the 5 is a 15. And then that ends up giving me, what I multiply times would be 7n plus 6. And those two are the same, aren't they? So these two here are the same. So that ends up giving me 7n plus 6. And it ends up giving me a 9n squared minus 15. And I'm done. There it is. Okay, number 6. (21) k to the third minus 84k squared plus 15k minus 60. So I'm going to group these two and these two. Okay? Does 21 go into 84? Yeah, it does. How many times? 4, correct? So 21 goes into both of them, and then what do we use for k cubed and k squared? K squared. So that gives me k minus 4. Everybody see where I'm at? Okay, the leading term is a positive, so what are we going to take out this time? A positive. The only time you're going to take a negative out is when that first term's negative. Now, does 15 go into 60? Yes, 4 times. So 15 I'm going to take out, which leaves me k minus 4. Agreed? Okay? So these two are the same. So I can factor them out. And then what's left over is 21k squared plus 15. Okay, number 7. (25n cubed), I should say v cubed, plus 5v squared plus 30v plus 6. Okay? So grouping these first two together and these last two together, what can I factor out of the first one? 5, because 5 goes into 25, doesn't it? And then what do we pick for v cubed and v squared? V squared. So that ends up giving me 5v plus 1. And then what can I factor out of these two here? Does 6 go into 30? So I know 6 is going to come out. Agree? And that leaves me 5v plus 1. These two are the same, aren't they? So we have 5v plus 1. And what's left over? There you go. Anybody have that? Okay, number 8. I have 105 n to the third plus 175 n squared minus 75 n minus 125. So we're going to group these two together, and you're going to group these two together. Notice this thing is in descending order, isn't it? Into the third, into the second, into the first, into the zero. Agreed? What's anything to the 0 power is equal to what? 1. Okay, so what can I factor out of the first one? I'm thinking 5. What do you think? Huh? So let's see if that works. 5 times 21. And 5 goes in there how many times? 35. So it looks like, excuse me. I'm trying to figure out what the greatest common factor of 105 and 175 is. 5 is not going to be that because I get 21. Let's see here.
15.
Yeah. Be 15. 15 n squared. Okay? So it's what? 7 n plus, what? 15 times that would be what? Goes in there once. 15. That can't be right. 15 goes in there once. Yeah, it should be 12. I knew it didn't look right. Now, the first term's negative, so we got to factor out a negative, don't we? Correct? So I'm thinking 25 on this one. What do you think? I got 75 cents and I got $1.25. 25 probably goes into it, doesn't it? So that gives me what? 3 n minus 5. Something doesn't look right, does it? These aren't the same, are they? So what did we do wrong?
15 times 12 is 180.
15 times 12 is 180.
Yeah.
So this should that's not right, is it? So this is right over here. So we're going to have to figure out what the GCF of 105 is and 175 is. So I'm going to use prime factorization. I'm going to write it out by its prime factors. 3 times 5 times 7. 175 is 25.
35.
Times, is it 35?
Yeah.
Let's see here. 25 times, let's see, 7. And then that's 5 times 5. So they share a 7 and 1 5. So it'd be 35. So we should have taken a 35 out of this first one. So I'm going to do it right here. 35 n squared out of the first one, which would give me 3n. And then I take 35 n squared out of that one, which would give me minus 5. Now they're the same. These are the same now. I can take it out in front. And what's left over is 35 n squared minus 25. Okay? Got a question? I screwed up. I didn't factor out the greatest common factor. The greatest common factor was 35, not 15. That was my fault. Okay? There's your final. Okay, look at 9. We spent a lot of time on this because this is very important. This is putting everything together so far that we've done. And you're going to split the middle a lot in here the rest of the semester. So we have to make sure we can group. Okay, here and here, we're gonna group those two together. This is 2.3 nodes. Okay? So 84 doesn't go into 96. I'm gonna prime factor it. I don't know if you guys have probably never saw this before. It's called prime factor tree. And 84 is 2 and 42 and 3 and 7, or pardon me, 6 and 7 and 2 times 3. So what do they share in common? This and this and this and this. Looks like that's it. So it'll be 2 times 3 would be 6. So 6n squared. So that gives me 16n minus 14. And this last one I'm going to factor out a 7, and that ends up giving me 16n minus 14 as well. Those two are the same, so I can factor those out, and then what's left over is 6n squared plus 7. You have to be able to factor out the greatest common factor. And then to find those factors, you might have to use your calculator, okay? Which is okay on these bigger numbers. All right? Okay, number 10. 10's a little easier, I think, because the numbers are smaller. Okay, we're going to group these two together and these two together. 16 doesn't go into 28. The next biggest factor of 16 is 8. It doesn't go into 28, so it's got to be 4. 4 what? V what? Squared. So that's going to give me 7V plus 4. The first term's negative, correct? So we're going to factor out a negative. Does 12 go into 21? See, I write out all the factors of the smallest number. Everybody see that? And I just start taking the smallest number, which was 12. Does 12 go into 21? No. Does 6? No. Does 4? No. Does 3? Yep. So then that ends up giving me 7V plus 4. And then those two are the same. I can factor those out, and that leaves me these two left over, which would be 4V squared minus 3. Is it getting any easier? I can't tell. This is different, isn't it? Okay. Number 11. See if you've already started before I do it. So 4V cubed minus 12V squared minus 5V plus 15. So we're going to group these two together and these two together. So does 4 go into 12? Huh? Yep. And then we got V squared again, don't we? So it gives me V minus 3. Everybody see where I got the V minus 3? Now, what did we learn when that first term's negative? What should we always factor out? Huh? A negative. And does 5 go into 15?
Yes.
Yeah, so then that leaves me this right here. So these two are the same, so I can factor them out. Then that leaves me 4b squared minus 5. I have 49 x cubed minus 35 x squared plus 56x minus 40. Okay, so those two. So 7 works in both of those. That's the GCF. And what left over in the parentheses would be this. Now this time the leading term's positive, isn't it? So I just factor out a positive. So what's the greatest? What I look here, just real quick. We want to get a 7x minus 5 here, don't we? Correct? So what would you multiply times 7x to get 5x, or to get 56x? 8. There's your GCF. And then when I distribute, I get this, don't I? So then that gives me 7x minus 5 multiplied times 7x squared plus 8. There it is. Okay, look at 13. Okay, so I factored out 3p squared and end up with 8p plus 7. Factor out a negative 7. Always take a negative out when that leading coefficient's negative. These two are the same. Factor them out, and then these two are left over. There's 13. Last one. Last one. Okay, 24 r to the third minus 64 r squared minus 21r plus 56. I'm going to group these two together and these two together. Is 24 going to 64? No, the next biggest factor of 24 is 12. Is 12 going to 64? The next biggest factor of 24 is 8. Is 8 going to 64? Yep. So it'd be 8r squared. What do you multiply times 8 to get 24? 3. R squared would be r, right? R squared times r, you add exponents, agreed? Now what do you multiply times 8 to get 64? 8. Again, the leading coefficient of these two is negative, so what do I factor out? A negative. Factor out a 7, which leaves me 3r minus 8. That's the GCF. And then these two are the same, correct? And what's left over are these two, correct? So I'll let you work on your homework now.